hopefully.
Yeah, looks like we're good. Pull it up on my phone. Here we go.
Sweet.
Wait till some folks jump on, it looks like.
Yeah, sounds good. Are you starting today? Or am I?
Say again? Yeah, I'll start. I think that's right.
So I'll just make sure.
Yeah. Oh, and we'll have to talk about, or I guess I'm talking about it now since we're live. Che and I will be in the woods Monday and Wednesday next week. So I don't know if we might just schedule a Friday one and then finish up First John next Friday.
That sounds good. So a week from this Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me.
All right. Sounds good.
I'll put it down so I don't forget, but that's no problem.
All right. Hey, well, it looks like there's some folks with us. Thanks for being here. We are going to be in First John chapter 4, starting in verse 15. We looked at this last paragraph just a little bit last session, but we'll go ahead and look at it in greater detail. And I'm going to read through chapter 5, verse 4. So 4:15 through 5:4. Actually, I'll probably include verse 5:5. So one of the things that's been on John's mind this whole time in writing this letter is that he wants to clearly communicate who Jesus really is, that he's testifying about his understanding, his personal knowledge, his intimate acquaintance with Jesus. In fact, right here where we were yesterday or on Monday, 4:14, he says, "For we have seen and testify that the Father has sent the Son to be the Savior of the world." John's really concerned that people believe in the true Jesus through the apostles' witness and testimony. Just go ahead and look back at verse 1 of chapter 4 when he said, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits." There's just a lot, and always has been a lot, of false ideas about who Jesus is. People want to make him into what they want him to be. And John keeps saying, if you're really going to have life in Jesus, you have to understand him correctly. You have to know who he really was, who he really is. Two characteristics stand out in this book. He is light and he is love. Now that's framed, he usually says, God is light and God is love. But by the time we get to the end of this book, he's going to say, by the way, your God is Jesus. Jesus is this God who is light and love. And if you want to believe you have fellowship with him, you got to measure your life up against whether you're walking in the light as he is in the light and whether you love like he loves. So over and over again, that's kind of the thing he keeps coming back to. Do you have more to say about that?
I think that's great. And especially that piece about love is really what we talked about a lot last time, the first part of chapter 4, and it is going to continue on here through the end of 4, beginning of 5.
Yeah, that's right. We're still right in the middle of that conversation. So, all right, let's read chapter 1 John 4:15. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. We have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. God is love, and the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this, love is perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar, and for the one who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, that the one who loves God should love his brother also. Whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and whoever loves the Father loves the child born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and observe his commandments. And for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is the one who overcomes the world? But he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God.
One of my favorite things about this section is the way he talks about what we believe in. And I think that's so important as Christians to kind of examine ourselves. Like, what is it that fundamentally, what's the thing that we believe in? And I think sometimes we can get into thinking, well, we believe in like a certain code of ethics, or we believe in just certain ideas or whatever, or ideals and all these kinds of things. Um, but all those things are sort of byproducts of the things we really believe in. And I'm seeing at least three in this section that we read. Verse 16, we have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. So that's one thing we believe in, we believe the love that God has for us. Um, he says in the beginning of chapter 5, whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ, or the Messiah, the King, the Savior, is that person is born of God. And then again in verse 5, who is the one who overcomes the world? But he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God, which is kind of to your point a minute ago, that really where John's going to drive is Jesus is our God. He's the one who reveals God to us and makes him known. That's such a helpful, and I may have missed one or two in this section, and I can't really remember how many times he's used this exact language of this is what we believe. Mm-hmm. We believe in the love of God. We believe that Jesus is the Messiah, our King and Savior. We believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he's not just a special person, but he's God embodied. If we can embrace some of those fundamental beliefs, a lot of the things that he's talking about here about how we should live our lives, I'm not saying they're effortless necessarily all the time, but they do come a lot more naturally if we could figure out how to believe in the love of God, believe in Jesus as the Messiah, and believe in Jesus as the Son of God. That transforms everything.
Yeah, very good. And this may come out wrong. I'm not critiquing the way you just said that, but it's something that I don't remember when I heard somebody maybe make this point one time. We use the phrase a lot about what we believe in, that phrase, we believe in this, we believe in that. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in the love of God? Do you believe in, somebody says, yeah, I believe in that. I believe in that. That's different than saying that you believe God or believe Jesus.
Yeah.
In fact, even in this text, he doesn't say, do you believe in the love? He says, you believe the love God has for you. And he doesn't say, do you believe in Jesus? He says, no, you believe Jesus is the Christ. Whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ. And then verse 5, the one who overcomes the world is the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. Not just believes in Jesus, but believes this about him. And I'll tell you, that's maybe semantically simple, but it's very different. I could say, do you believe in, and then I could ask you about some politician, do you believe in Donald Trump? Do you believe in, Nancy Pelosi? Do you believe in Joe Biden? And you might be able to say, well, yeah, of course I believe in them, but do I believe them? Do I trust them? That's different. And I'll just say, I think I grew up a lot salving my conscience by saying well, yeah, I believe in those things, but the proof of whether or not I believe those things is in my faith and obedience, and that's going to be part of the text here.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I think that's a great point, that it may be a little bit semantical, but how we talk about stuff dictates the way we think. And I think if I'm tracking with you as far as noting that and trying to tag that difference. If I believe something, then I'm going to do something. Correct. And that's what this passage implies. Well, it doesn't imply, it says it. I mean, verse 15, for instance, whoever confesses that right. Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. Yeah. I've got to believe Jesus so much that it comes out in the way that I speak, and not only in the way that I speak, but the way I live. Verse 16, we have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. God is love, and the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. The part later where he says, how could you say I love God but you don't even love your brother, how can you say you love a God you've never seen when you don't really believe the love of God if it's not manifesting in your lifestyle? So I think that's a good point. That makes a lot of sense.
And John does this in a couple of different ways because he uses terms like know God, do you know him?
Mhm.
And terms like abide in. When we talk about ourselves as being disciples of Jesus, well, what does that mean? Somebody might say, well, I'm a disciple of Jesus. Well, why? Well, because I go to church and, I say I love him and he's important to me. But disciples practice disciplines. Like the whole idea is, man, I know what he taught. I believe what he taught. I discipline my life after the things that he taught. It kind of reminds me of the stuff that Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount at the end when he says, many will say to me that day, Lord, Lord, and of course they would say, well, we believe in you. We believe in you. And he would say like, yeah, but I don't know you just because like you don't know me. Um, I honestly think this is one of those discussions that's vitally important these days because so many people, I might be one of them, claim to know God or to believe in God or to care about these things. But John's going to always bring us back to, yeah, but are you actually living this life and abiding in him? Do you really know him? And have you proven to yourself that that's the case by the way your life has changed?
Yeah. And I mean, I do think he's, to your point that this is a discussion that now we need to be having. It seems like it's one they needed to as well, because he says in verse 17, by this love is perfected. The implication being, I don't know, maybe he wasn't saying love's not perfected in you guys. Maybe he was saying this is how you know for sure. So is God's love perfected in you? So that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. So there's still this level we need to attain to. I thought what Charity said here about believing is also having confidence in God and his word and his way. That's what a lot of this last part of First John is about really, really having a total, full commitment to God, where we're confessing that Jesus is the Son of God, and we're believing the love of God, and we're abiding in him, and we're loving like him, and we're keeping all that kind of stuff. It takes us in a big way. So what's your take on the phrase, by this love is perfected with us? I can't remember if we talked about it, but I'll tell you what I think, and then you can kind of kick around
Yeah.
what I
Are
want to
you
say.
talking about when it's used back in 4:12, or are you talking about like 4:18 or whatever?
Yeah, I'm talking about verses 4:17. By this love
Oh,
is perfected with us. And I don't know, like I'm not sure if 12 and 17 are saying two different things. There it says his love is perfected in us, and then in 17, by this love is perfected with us. I would see those almost parallel, but it
yep.
seems to me that the message is like, because I think there's a way to say, wait, you're saying God's love isn't perfect? What is that? What are you talking about? How could God's love not be perfect? How does, because these passages, verse 12 and verse 17, are saying our response to the love of God, us abiding in love, perfects God's love in us or with us. So isn't God's love perfect? Well, insofar as showing sacrificial love and being compassionate to those, yeah, it's God's love is complete in a way, but God's love doesn't have its perfect result or its perfect work, or it doesn't, the way I think about it, complete the cycle that love kind of always is meant to inspire. The cycle of love is not completed until we also live in the love of God, that we love God and we love others. I mean, you think about someone who loves someone, they love someone romantically or a child or whatever, and that person doesn't reciprocate that love, or they don't carry on that love into the world, there's still something missing. There's something kind of off and something kind of wrong. And so we would feel like, well, like I love them perfectly, but the love itself was not perfected. If that's right, I don't know what you think about that, but if that's right, I know whatever exactly he's saying here, there's a great burden that we should feel,
Yeah.
though it shouldn't be burdensome. But we should have a sense of duty of God's trying to do something, and I need to carry on that love and not just be like, oh, God, thank you so much for loving me. This is so great. I love being loved by God. If I believe the love of God, then not only am I going to enjoy receiving it, but I'm also going to live in it. and carry it out as God intended it to.
Yeah, very good. I think that's exactly right. So you put verse 12 and verse 17 together, um, you know, where it's talking about love being perfected. And I think we had this conversation a couple of days ago or a couple of sessions ago. But here's my, maybe here's the way to illustrate it. God has often had things like this, that God's part of it was exactly right and it was perfect. So we could say, is God's love perfect? Well, sure, of course it is. This could be like talking about the old covenant that God made with the Jews. Was the covenant God made perfect? Well, sure, but the Bible will say it wasn't perfect. Well, why not? What did God do wrong? And God will say, well, I didn't do anything wrong. The problem was on the response of the others in the covenant. In some ways, this new covenant is a covenant of love. God's done everything he can to love us and to demonstrate it. But just like the Jews of old, when they didn't keep their part of the covenant didn't work. There was fault with the covenant. There's an imperfection in God's love and the intention of God's love when it does not make me abide in love. And if I don't go on to love others as God's loved me, then it's not come to its maturity. It's not come to its fruition. It isn't perfect. And somebody say, well, then that's God's fault. No, that's not God's fault. God's always wanted to work with us. So he does what he does. He demonstrates what he does. He manifests it in us, calls us to it, and says, all right, no, keep my command, be a part of this covenant, perfect this love. And maybe this gets at what he's about to say in verse 18 about there not being any fear in love. Like, imagine that for a minute. Like, let's imagine that we actually got to the point in our lives where we were abiding in love. We looked at every other human person in the world, and it didn't matter what they looked like, what the color of their skin was, what their heritage was, what language was coming out of their mouth, even what their sins had been or were. But we genuinely wanted what was best for them. We longed for them to be saved. We loved them deeply like God loved them. If we got to that point, that God had changed our hearts like that, what would that do for us? Well, I'll tell you one thing is I wouldn't be so afraid of God. Like, oh no, if I appear before God, is he going to judge me? No, like God knows my heart. God knows I love. I'm not afraid of God in that way. Because I really am abiding in love. I've gotten to this place in my life. And I think Laura was pointing this out when we get to chapter 5, verse 10, and it's going to talk about that testimony being within us. It's sort of like there's something we know deep inside that God has changed about us, where his love has come to maturity. It's been perfected. And I don't operate the same way I used to in my relationship with God out of fear, because this is real. Now, the flip side to that is, this is a super challenging text if we're still harboring hatred, if we still don't love people, if we're having trouble forgiving others and letting go of past hurts. This is a challenging text because it will convict us and say there's work that needs to be done. But that's my take. I think it's the same thing you're saying. Maybe I was just more wordy and probably lost everybody. But
No, I mean, I think it's a great point. And the thing is, why part of why this thing is so important, I think, is it comes back to a theme that John's been hitting quite a few times now of having confidence. The reason why this perfect love thing is so important is so that we can be free from fear of judgment. I mean, I think that's verse 17. When you put 17 and 18 together, it seems to me the fear here is fear of judgment. Sometimes I have a hard time with this because you'll hear people say like, oh, like before you come to Christ, you're supposed to fear God. And when you first come to Christ, you're supposed to fear God. But then eventually perfect love casts out fear. And I'm not really sure that I totally agree with that if what we mean is we shouldn't fear God anymore, because there's New Testament, quite a number of New Testament teachings to Christians saying you should fear God. But there's that kind of fear that, like, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. I don't think is only supposed to be like, oh, I'm scared of God, but it's more that you properly understand his power and authority and you orient yourself appropriately. I mean, that's what we do with things we're afraid of, whether it's heights or somebody who's so intelligent or beautiful or whatever, they intimidate us. We kind of orient ourselves accordingly. Well, the problem is if I'm living in sin, then that fear of God is going to be, I'm terrified. I'm really scared of God. But if I fear God really for who he really is, the God who is love, then if I'm conducting myself as he's taught me to,
Yeah.
then actually I'm going to have great confidence to fear him and his love being perfected in me, to fear the loving God who's my father. Then I'm going to have confidence in the day of judgment. I'm not scared at all of judgment day. I mean, he said that back in chapter 2, verses 28 and 29. Little children abide in him, so when he appears, we may have confidence and not shriek away at his coming. He said the same thing in 3:19. We will know this, that we are of the truth, and will assure our heart before him,
Right.
which I'm sure is now, but also then. But the interesting thing about both of these texts, in at the end of chapter 2 and beginning of 3, and then in the middle of 3, and then this third one here, all of them have attached an expectation of how we're living. So right after the end of chapter 2, he starts and he says, hey, everyone who fixes this hope on him purifies himself even as he is pure. In chapter 3, the part about we know we'll assure our heart because we're little children who don't just love in word and in tongue,
Yeah.
but in deed and in truth. And then
Right.
here again, love is perfected whenever we actually love as God has loved us. And therefore we have confidence in the day of judgment. And the thing I think about that is, I think as I say that, it sounds to me like it could be interpreted as, oh, so that means you've got to be perfect and good, and you basically earn your salvation, or you get to stand on judgment day and be like, hey, God, I did it. I accomplished so much. I'm really glad I'm here. I'm glad we got to meet finally. I don't think that's it at all.
Right.
I think the point John is making is, and back in chapter 3, he hits this really explicitly at the beginning of it. He says, hey, I don't know what we're going to be, but I know we are. And what we are children of God.
Right.
And we will be like him.
Right.
The same thing in chapter 3. He laid down his life for us, and we lay down our lives for the brethren. And here it seems to me, I think somebody actually kind of mentioned this in the comments, that this, to me at least, this bit in verse 17, as he is, so also are we in this world.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of obedience. That's the point of righteousness. That's the point of love. It's not so we show up on judgment day and say, hey, God, look at all I accomplished and look how good I was the whole time. It's so that we show up on judgment day and we look like our brother Jesus. We look like the Son of God. We really look like God's children. And I think it's a great merging of grace and obedience, this transformation that God's producing, that should give us confidence.
Yeah, I mean, we live in such a, I think maybe the world's always been this way, but we're living in a time right now where people want to sort of go to extremes on either side. I mean, you keep hearing people talk about being pro-life, for example, and somebody will say, yeah, be pro-life, like care about abortion. And somebody's like, you're not actually pro-life unless you care about people that are alive and suffering.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, that's right. So I need to pay attention to that. But then like you almost hear people like talk against people who are pro-life. For it's like, wait, well, why can't we be both here? And this is sort of things with John. It's like, let's take the two things, grace and obedience. It's obvious that he's saying part of the way you're going to assure your heart is you're going to be a more loving person and you're going to abide in love. And as the end of verse 17 says, you're going to see more of Jesus in you. We're like he is in this world.
Yeah.
That gives me confidence. But then somebody says, wait, are you saying you're perfect? And be like, no way, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I see more of Christ in me than I ever did before. And that gives me confidence. Well, what about the parts that aren't perfect? We'll go right back to what we just said a few minutes ago. I believe in the love God has for me. Okay, well, what's the love God has for me? He gave his son for me. For what purpose? To forgive my sins. So I'm kind of covered from both ways. Anybody who tries to stand on one without the other, though, is in a heap of trouble. Somebody says, I'm confident in God. Why? Because Jesus died for you, for me. Okay, so you're just going to be completely imperfect all your life and like revel in it? There's a bunch of scriptures that are going to say, you better watch out. You can't treat that thing that way. What's going to give you more confidence in the day of judgment is he's changing you. He's bringing you from glory to glory, and you're more glorified than you used to be, but you know you haven't reached full potential. Like you were mentioning, we know what we are, but we don't know what we will be. And then the other person who's like, well, no, I'm going to rest on my like performance and I'm different and I'm going to look at this and have confidence. Like, wait, if you don't take into account that you have the blood of Christ to cover what's lacking, you're in trouble. So it's a perfect balance of both things. And often truth is like that. We humans want to separate those things and make them mutually exclusive ideas, and they shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why that language that John uses so much, both in this letter and also especially kind of near the end of his gospel, um, that language of abiding. And I think that merges those together so well. Like to abide in God is that um, I'm trusting that He really does love me and that His love saves me and that He forgives me and all that stuff. But to have God abide in me is to say that I'm letting God's spirit live through me, the spirit of love and righteousness and holiness and all those kinds of things. That language of abiding, I think, puts all that stuff together a lot in a really beautiful way, um, and is challenging. Am I abiding in God, or am I abiding in the world? Am I loving the things of the world and living that way? Um, so I mean, we already kind of touched on this with the obedience stuff, but I mean that's a big point of emphasis here. I mean, verse 21,
right.
and this commandment we have from Him, that the one who loves God should love his brother also. Verse 2, by this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and observe His commandments. For
Yeah.
this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome. I mean, John really wants to understand, do not mess around with God's commandments. You have to be obedient like a good child should. If we're born of God, then we should obey the Father. That's the whole point. That's what Jesus did. And if we want to be like Him in this world, we're going to have to be obedient.
Yeah. No, and I think, again, this is one of those things that people get scared of, this word commandment. People want to make everything about God's grace. And John just doesn't let us do that. He keeps bringing it back. No, if you believe God and He commands, if you love God and He commands, then the proof of your love and the proof of your faith is you keep His commands. Jesus talked like that. Jesus would even say, whoever loves me, why do you say you love me, but you don't keep my commandments? And whoever loves me will keep my commandments. At the end of that section that Jesus was talking like that, He said, so that the world believes that I love my Father, arise, let us go from here. I do exactly as He says.
Yeah.
Like, that's how Jesus proved He loved His Father. So I think that's really important.
And that's how we love others. I think one of the interesting, I think verse 2 and verse 3 are really interesting and maybe challenging for us.
Yeah.
Verse 2, the thing that I think is um, kind of interesting is a lot of times there will be some commandment in scripture, and fill in the blank with whatever it is, church discipline, some God's commandments regarding sexuality or relationships or money or whatever. And someone might say, man, I don't want to do that. I just want to love that person.
Mhm.
Like I want to love them. Well, I think what John is saying to us in verse 2, by this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and keep His commandments. So if God's told me to do something, it may not seem like a loving thing to someone else, but actually that is the way I love them. God knows best how, God is love. And so He knows best how to tell us how to love. And so when I run into something, I'm like, man, this doesn't seem very loving. Well, yeah, that's because I'm a child. I don't know. I'm a child of God. I'm not God. I'm not the Father. And so I
Right.
need to trust that the Father, who is love, I need to believe the love that God has for me and then live in that love, even the stuff that's more challenging. And that counts the stuff too that's personal sacrifice and gentleness and forgiveness and all that stuff too. Sometimes we don't believe in that stuff either. And we're like, I don't think so. Do I believe the love that God has for me? If I do, then I'm going to do whatever He says. And that's how I'm going to love my brethren.
Yeah. Well, that just gets back to things we've talked about before, the tricks that we play in our heads, or the tricks the devil plays. It's like, hey, if you love somebody, just sort of let them live their life and be happy. When the Bible's like, no, if you love somebody, tell them the truth. And it's like, but that's going to hurt their feelings. Yeah, I know. But have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? Or have I been your best friend? Paul would say to the Galatians. Um, Things like, well, I love them, but I don't assemble, and I'm not part of a local church, but man, I really have a lot of affection for those people. It's like, no, if God told me to get together with them and participate with them and have fellowship with them and consider them and stir them up to love and good works, then I'm not loving them if I'm not assembling with them and being a part of them. There's a whole bunch of ways that we could talk about that. It's right on.
Yeah.
Um,
Verse 3.
so what's that?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Never mind.
In chapter 5, what do you think it means in verse 1 when it says, whoever's born of God loves the child born of him, or loves those born of him? Is that talking about Jesus? Or is that talking about like all the other people that are born of God, like brothers and sisters in Christ? How does yours read?
Yeah, whoever believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and whoever loves the Father loves the child born of him.
Yeah, and child's in italics.
Right, right, right.
So like
Love
it's
the one born of him.
right. It's
I
sort of
think based on verse 21, but like the context leading up to this at the end of chapter 4, and then even the verse right after chapter 5, verse 2, sure sounds to me like he's talking about loving our brothers and sisters
yeah.
on earth. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna be a Christian if you don't love Jesus. But it seems to me he'd be talking about uh, loving one another.
Yeah, I believe so too. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that that's the way we read that, because I think that's what's in context here. I've known people say or look at that verse and say, oh, so we got to love Jesus. If we love the Father, we got to love
Oh,
Jesus.
yeah, okay.
Um, Jesus isn't the only child born of him. Um, Anybody who's born of God, like in the family of God, are those that we need to love. So, Charity's comment here about how there's a lot of people that love God but don't keep his commandments. I'm gonna say I think that's kind of the point of this whole text is I think there are those that think they love God, that if they're not keeping God's commandments, if they don't treasure them, value them, believe in them, try to live them, then their claim of love is actually a pretty hollow claim.
Right.
Now, we can talk about other people all day long like that. And then I have to ask myself the same question. I really do believe I love God, but if I don't treasure his commands and keep his commands, do I really love him? And that's important.
Yeah. So verse 3 is a weird verse, I think. But I think it's important. And I think it's one of those I have never figured out how to articulate verse 3 other than like paralleling it with other similar kinds of statements, like where Jesus would say, come to me and take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Well, wait, it's a yoke though, right? Yeah, but it's easy. Yeah, okay. And I'll just say, maybe you figured out how to articulate this. This is one of those things where I think the more that I obey these things, or the more that I believe these things and just do them, the more that I find them to be true. And it's kind of one of those things, just, okay, I got to take this word that it's true and then go for it and then understand it as I practice it. I think it's the same thing with take my yoke upon you. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's like, Jesus, did you miss all the stuff you said in the Sermon on the Mount? Because that was not easy and light stuff.
Right.
But I think whenever you start doing it, you realize, wait, it is, because before, when I was being selfish and angry or lustful or prideful or whatever, it was a huge burden and it crushed me.
Right.
That's why I came to Jesus in the first place. And now that I'm keeping his commandments, which on paper, and even when you first start trying, I'm like, man, this is really hard. You realize actually they're not a burden, especially compared to the way things were.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't figured out how to talk about verse 3, so I don't know. What do you say about that?
I think it's like anything that anybody does that is at first hard, but then they realize the benefit is actually for them.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's not hard anymore. I hate running. And I know people that love running. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Why do you love running? You know, I used to not like eating healthy and eating vegetables. And I know people that are like, they love doing it. And it's like, well, why do you love that? That's gross. You know, well, because it's good for me. It's not a burden. Like I see the benefit. It's sort of like James teaching Christians to rejoice in trials. How can you rejoice in something so difficult? Why is it not a burden? Because it works in my favor, not against me. I mean, God's so good by his spirit at changing the way we look at things. It's just like Jesus. I mean, God said this to the Jews in the Old Testament, even when he was giving them all those laws that were dietary and cleanliness laws and all of that. He basically said, like, this is actually me showing my love for you. If you keep these commandments, they're actually going to be good for you. I'm going to protect you from things.
Yeah.
And it was only the real mature people that began to realize, oh, this kind of discipline and behavior in my life is not a burden. It's a blessing for me. I think John is finally saying, I figured this out in my life. It wasn't good for me to have a spirit to want to cast down fire on the Samaritans. it was better for me to have a spirit of love that wanted them to be saved rather than wanting them to be destroyed. You know, we're out of time. There's a lot more we could talk about with this, but we'll pick up there, I think, next time we study this.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. It's just fun as always. Hope these little conversations are as encouraging and helpful for you as they are for us. So we're gonna next Monday and Wednesday we're not gonna be on, but next Friday, so a week from this Friday, Lord willing, we'll be on, and we'll pick up here and talk about the victory that overcomes the world.
Yeah, try to finish up. We'll try to finish up 1 John on that day. Thanks, everybody.
See y'all next time.